Well, how about this? It's like President Trump knew that we were about to talk markets and talk economy with Taylor Riggs, co-anchor of the Big Money Show, 11 o'clock Central Time on Fox Business. The president just putting up on Truth Social, our economy will boom, all caps, like never before. So obviously the president knows, everyone does, it's been a rough week for the markets. Can he calm Wall Street? All right, Taylor, what do you think's going on right now? And the goal of the administration, as you see it, based on what has been a bad week for the markets, is what?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. You know, the markets are very short-term thinking. We think in days, maybe in three-quarter chunks to get to the next earnings season. And I think you have an administration in Trump 2.0 that is thinking a little bit more longer term, which is very different from what we saw in Trump 1.0 when he really was focused on the stock market. So the stock market is reacting to headlines and uncertainty. Businesses hate uncertainty. And I think with tariffs on and tariffs off, they don't know how to prepare. But you have a Trump administration this time around that has said, look, we're not looked at the equity market. We're looking at bringing down costs for consumers. And the best gauge of that is looking at the drop in the 10-year yield, because that's going to then set the bar for your auto rates, your credit card rates, your mortgage rate to come down. So I think they're right in focusing on a 10-year yield and how that impacts the rate that you pay on your everyday loans, versus the stock market, which is just looking 3 days ahead, 6 months ahead at the uncertainty. But certainly it doesn't feel good, I think, when you're in the moment. I will remind your audience that we had a similar correction in October of 2023 when the S&P 500 also fell about 10% from its latest high, and we call that a correction. But again, this is an administration that's focused on the long term, and the reprivatization and the deleveraging of the public sector, they've said, will take time. And that's something that China can do because they have 100 years. We have 2 years until the next midterm cycle. And so it's easy for us to get caught up in the speed. And he's trying to compete against China, who, again, they think in century terms, not 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, Taylor, it would be a lot different right now in the markets if DOGE was just the main conversation and the tariffs were not this concern and this uncertainty? Like, if we took the tariffs out of it, how would the markets be reacting to DOGE? Because I actually think deep down, even people that didn't vote for Trump on Wall Street understand the government spending is out of control and unsustainable.
1,000%. And I think a lot of people on Wall Street are eager to hear more conversations about DOGE, tax cuts, deregulation. Those are all the positives that the economy is really looking for. And in Trump 1.0, all of that offset the impact of tariffs. This time around, we're doing the reverse. We're doing tariffs first and getting to tax cuts later. And so you have the narrative right now that is, frankly, some of the negatives, the tariff. And we're not hearing enough about the tax cuts and deregulation. So certainly business leaders in the markets are eager to hear more about the positive. And I feel like in the last 2 days, we've started to hear more about the tax cuts. The president has said we are still on board with that. You've had the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick say that we're still full steam ahead. We're still looking at tax cuts. That's the good part of the economy that I think the administration could do a better job at messaging what they are doing to get that to the finish line.
And even on the tariffs, do you feel like, Taylor, if there was actual certainty on the what and the when on tariffs, it would not be as jittery as it is right now? Because it does feel like it's stop and go. It's, a new thing every day. But is it really going to happen? Is it not going to happen?
Yeah.
Is that also like versus just saying this is what the tariff will be and when, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts? Would that actually be helpful if they wanted to go down this road of tariffs?
Yes. And you heard glimmers of that from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent a week ago, where he said if tariff is the favorite word, the second favorite word is reciprocal. I can plan as a business leader around reciprocal tariffs. If Europe is charging me 10% tariff on my car, but I'm only charging them 2.5% on their cars, If I'm a business leader, I know what reciprocal means. We all come up to 10. Europe comes down to 2.5% to meet me, or in a perfect world, we all go to 0 because we believe in the free market. I know how to plan because I know what reciprocal means. To your point, I think we don't like the 200%, and then here's an exemption, and then we're up to 50, and then we're off, and then here's a 30-day pause. And so I think the markets have had a very hard time getting to April 2nd, which I think will be reciprocal tariffs. And that's understandable. There's no reason Europe should be charging me 10% on my car when I'm only charging them 2.5% on their car. Mm-hmm. Let's fix that issue. That's a strong issue that business leaders and I think the American people can wrap their head around. We hear maybe that April 2nd they can post actual, like an itemized receipt. Give me everything that's being unfair, put it on a website the way Doge is, and I can go and I can look and I can see what I'm being taxed abroad and what the lower taxes I'm being taxed here, and let's get to that negotiation. So I think reciprocity is something that the business community can really much get behind.
Taylor Riggs, co-anchor, co-host of The Big Money Show, 11 o'clock Central Time on Fox Business Network. Now, when you look at just the markets in general, and you're right, it's day to day, week to week, quarter to quarter is kind of how it operates. What do you think the future is going to hold from the standpoint of like figuring out that fine line between this may not be good short term, there will be economic pain, but long term, this actually can be a boost for the economy in general? Your colleague, Charlie Gasparino, called it the market basically puking out the government stimulus money that has really driven this thing the last few years. How much of that is also factored into here to what's going on?
Yeah, 1,000%. I've heard a lot of different analogies. It's the drug addict detoxing. It is the party, and you're finally taking away my punch bowl at 4 a.m., and I still want to continue the party. It's taking the patient off of government spending life support, right? And when you pull a ventilator off of a life, there is some of those jitters in the first few moments until that human can breathe on its own. So all of those analogies apply. Certainly some pain and some jitters as we deleverage from the public sector, which is massively horrible. Look at Europe. They've had zero growth for years because it's all bloated government spending. They can't innovate. They can't get anything done, versus transitioning to the private sector, which is good in the long term, but takes time. And there are those moments that feel weebly when we're taking the patient off life support. But in the long term, I never bet against the market because those are the best American companies that are innovating. Tell me where Google, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Apple, those are all American companies. Give me the last time Europe innovated and made a great AI company. I can't think of one. So I never bet against the American economy. I'm in the S&P 500 as a broad gauge of the American economy. Yes, there are some bumps, but I think long term, we know that the AI story isn't going anywhere. The consumer has had its ups and downs, but we know that the consumer always in America has been really resilient. On average, if you go back, to the history of the stock market, you're generally gaining on average about 8% a year. And I would remind people that for 2 straight years, we just went up and up and up. Mm-hmm. In the market to the tune of 20%. So you were bound to have a little bit of a correction, but long term, if I'm trying to trade the market, I'm going to miss out on all of the opportunities. So I'm definitely more of a buy and hold person where, if I'm thinking about the stock market as a t-shirt and it just went 10% on sale, some people would say that now sounds like a great opportunity. Certainly bumps in the road in the short term, but I think in the long run, I would never bet against the American economy and the ingenuity and the entrepreneurship that comes along with it.
Well said. Taylor Riggs. We'll be watching 11 o'clock Big Money Show on Fox Business. Thank you, Taylor. Have a great weekend. Appreciate the time.
You too. Appreciate it.
All right. There you go. Well done and well said.